Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the What a Man podcast. I am Ty Nichelle, and joining me tonight is Mr. Stephen Ortiz. He's a comedian, and he is from, you said Indiana, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry about
That's okay.
that. First of all, I want to thank you for agreeing to sit down and have this conversation with me. But before we get started, please let everyone know who is the comedian Stephen Ortiz.
Yeah, man. Well, like you said, I'm a comedian from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I got three kids, an amazing wife, and I do comedy full time, man. It's my passion, it's my privilege, and something I'll do forever. So, yeah.
So again, I wanted to thank you for agreeing to do do this well, I'm going to say conversation because I don't like to call my stuff interviews. So
No
I
problem.
thank you for having this conversation with me. Number two, I drew interest in you when I did see you in Red Print magazine that I was featured in as well. I noticed that you were a comedian and you do have your own show. You did tell me that you had a morning show and everything like that. So let's jump into that a little bit. Like let's give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you do and how did this get started.
Yeah. So, I started comedy in 2018. It was right after my divorce. I loved comedy my whole life, but didn't really think I had anything to offer. And then after my divorce, I just was on a new level of happy and freedom, and was like, let's go for it. And since then, it's been a thing I did kind of as a hobby until middle of last year when I went on disability full time. Um, wasn't able to work anymore, and my wife was like, "Look, I'll work. Go after your dream." And so yeah, since then it's just been going nonstop, and the momentum's good. Doing all these interviews and conversations. The morning show that I'm on, Coffee with the Dog, on minddogtv.com, is a morning show that I was a guest on, and we hit it off, and then they added me as one of the co-hosts. So it's an amazing show. We have all sorts of people from every walk of life. We have comedians, authors, musicians. We've had men and women who are in the charity sector, people who are doing, just all sorts of things. Because we're an open format show, and everyone's welcome.
And congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, and you mentioned that you had a disability, and I did see in following you that you are in a wheelchair.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my back was broken at birth, um, and basically from the time I was born until I was 4, I lived in the hospital, um, having surgeries and just them basically fixing what they broke, but also they offered to make me a case study in exchange for the surgeries being free. But in return, they got to do some exploratory surgeries. So by the time I was 4, I had close to 40 surgeries.
Oh wow. Mm,
And I walked on crutches most of my life.
mm.
Um, and then the last few years, when my legs started kind of getting weak on me, is when I to the wheelchair full time, and then a little bit later was not able to work anymore.
So that's great that you are still able to navigate your career with, with the challenges that you have going on and everything. So that's definitely commendable. You also mentioned that not too long ago or whenever it was that you did get a divorce. Um, so when you're doing your comedy and you're facing these challenges, like divorce, you having some health issues or whatever, how does that how do you navigate? Because and I'm asking that because I've had some other comedians on and they've always expressed that because you're a comedian, everybody expects you to be happy all the time. Everybody expects you to make them laugh all the time. But I guess what they don't understand is that you still are a person and you have your own things going on as well. So how does that work for you being a comedian?
So part of that is true. A lot of people, when they hear you're a comedian, tell me a joke, make me laugh, whatever.
Mhm,
Um, it doesn't bother me a whole lot. As far as navigating trials and tribulations of life,
mhm,
um, I just don't really let them get me down. My mindset is there's somebody somewhere going through something worse. My situation could be worse, and that's usually kind of when I shine the most, is because, especially when I'm miserable, 'cause I don't want anyone to feel like I do.
mhm.
And attitude is contagious. So, whether I'm having health problems, life problems, whatever, um, I try to keep them to myself and try to be positive outwardly. Now, obviously, it doesn't always work. I mean, I have a wife and kids. Sometimes they're there for when I'm not as positive as I'd like to be. But yeah, I try really hard to maintain a positive attitude, because the world's a shitty place. It's a dark place, and it's easy to join into that. It's not
Mhm.
easy is to leave the world a little happier and a little brighter than when you found it. So that's kind of my mindset. So yeah, I don't let anything, you know, tear me down too far.
So when you decided that you wanted to become a comedian and I guess go out and uh, do these performances and play crowds and everything. So when you approach people like, "Hey, I want to come to your club and do some, do some comedy or whatever," did they ever like look at you like a way like, you know, because sometimes when it's something that's out of the ordinary, people tend to kind of shy away from it. And you know, not that being in a wheelchair is unordinary, is anything that's not
Right.
don't see, but we don't see comedians on the stage in a wheelchair. So it's like, did anybody ever have any reservations because of that?
Um, Family were the ones who kind of told me I shouldn't do it because there's no one else doing it.
Hmm.
Um, I've had one or two venues, once they found out I was in a wheelchair, go from, "Oh, we'd love to have you," to, "Sorry, we're booked," within like two emails. So has it happened? Yes. It doesn't happen a lot though.
Hmm.
Um, Generally speaking, most places, when they see the wheelchair, they worry that I can't get on the stage or whatever. But I'm usually just like, "Hey, give me the mic. I don't need a stage. You know,
Hmm.
I'll go in the kitchen and perform if you want me to. It's not a big deal." So yeah.
So when the clubs do book you, right, and you come in and they know that you're in a wheelchair, do you then feel like, oh, you're just booking me because I'm in a wheelchair, or do you really feel like that they believe in your talent? Because sometimes somebody could take something and then use that as like, oh, it's a show because he's in the wheelchair, whatever the case, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of looking at the person, for their talents.
Um, I would say no.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, generally speaking, yeah, I've never really had that. I've had some people say, "Hey, I'm in a wheelchair too. We should do a show together or whatever." But so then, yes, but no, I've yet to discover that. Fortunately, not all, but a lot of comedians are really honest and straightforward.
Mhm.
Um, so if they don't think you're funny, they're not going to book you, and they're going to tell you you're not funny. I mean, that's just how it goes. Or they'll be polite and say you're not a good fit for our show or whatever. But
Mhm.
yeah, the wheelchair's never really helped me get a gig, but it's never really stopped me either. A couple times it has, but I mean that's two times out of hundreds of shows. So and
So
some you lose some.
in your comedic journey, right? Have you ever did any performances or been to a venue and you just could not grasp the crowd, or you didn't get the reaction from a joke that you thought you was gonna get, or oh, my wife laughed at it, so but they didn't, you know what I mean? Like, has that ever happened to you?
Um, so I can honestly say I've never bombed on stage. That's never happened. I've had to struggle to get the audience, to capture their attention,
Mhm.
which is fairly common. I mean, when you're performing at a bar and they decide not to turn the TVs off, or they don't turn down the music, like you
Mhm.
have to you have to do something to get their attention, But for the most part, yeah, I've never really had the issue. Now, some of the shows I've done in indie in the past, like I've performed as like the intermission between like rap acts, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
like so I've done some shows where like I'm the only white guy, I'm the only comedian, I am the only dude in a wheelchair, and there's just been 45 minutes of gangster rap, and then here comes me. Um, and again, it at first it's always a little like, man, how do I follow that? But every time I've done it, I've had it's been a great response. And that's usually when I whip out some of the edgier, the edgier jokes, just to kind of, because they've just been listening to their favorite music, and a lot of them it's one of their favorite local musicians, and I got to go in and make an impact. And like I said, it's been good. I mean, I've gone and performed with another comic at one of these events, and he could not. Like
Mm.
they didn't even include him in the video afterwards. He was just silence the whole time he was up there. But again, it wasn't even necessarily his fault. It was just he didn't adjust to the crowd. Like his jokes were not for that demographic. It was just it was unrelatable for me even. And I was also like a white comedian guy. So it was. But yeah, he just he wasn't able to grasp it. But I've never had a lot of issues. It's been weird sometimes, but never a bad time for sure.
Has there ever been, like, since we're speaking about demographics, like, has there ever been a time where you perform for a certain demographic, and it could be anybody, and you just like you just couldn't do it, like you tried, but
Yes, this always sounds a little funky coming from me, but I get uncomfortable around other handicapped people.
okay.
So, the reason being is a lot of them want to try to compare, like my situation with theirs. I don't like
Mhm,
doing that because for a lot of them, they've, traumatic accidents or they have a serious disease. And like me, I was just broken at birth. I don't have anything that I can pass on. It's nothing that gets worse. It's just, I don't have like diapers and all of that stuff. So they want to compare apples to oranges. And I'm just like, sorry, man, I can't. What kind of nurse comes to your house? I don't have a nurse that comes to my house, man. I'm sorry. I don't, it's like, I don't know how to answer it. But, so I've been in front of a couple crowds that was primarily disabled people, and that was
mhm.
probably the hardest. I got laughs, but I could tell that a good number of them were like, I don't know if I believe this guy, It's like it that happens a lot too. A lot of people don't think I'm disabled, but yeah, it's but that's been the crowd that I think's been the touchiest. I think was just a crowd of other disabled people. I
Mhm,
feel, but outside of that, no, not really. I'm a people person, so I've always considered myself kind of empathetic in a way. I can kind of pick up on someone's vibe, their personality, something's
mhm.
wrong or not, and I can work with that to make sure people are comfortable when I'm around, and or on stage even, where they can feel comfortable laughing when I talk about falling down the steps or getting too high that I forget I can walk, like stuff like that, like it's a lot of people they'll laugh, but they gotta get comfortable first, So I usually
Right.
start out like, listen, you can stare, it's fine, not a big deal. Not gonna dance, but I'm here, and so it works out well.
So when they introduce does it get kind of so do they introduce you as a stand-up comedian, or they just
So they do, but you'll notice my stage name is the Sitcom, and that kind of started as a joke, right? The first couple of times I did an open mic, they referred to me as
Oh, I
a sit down
get
comic. Yeah,
it.
and so at first I was like, "That's dumb. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Um, But then after like three or four people were like, "Oh, you're a stand-up comedian, but you sit down." I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna eliminate this altogether. I'm gonna embrace it. And the sitcom was born. And again, it started out as a joke, but then clubs, the producers, everyone that I've worked with are like, "That's genius. Why hasn't anyone else thought of that?" And so yeah, I get introduced as a stand-up comic, but there's usually some joke in there somewhere. Or if there's walk-up music, it'll be like "Rolling" by Limp Bizkit or "Riding Dirty" or whatever. But yeah, it's great.
So who are some of your comedic influences? Like, who are some of the people that you look up to, or you admire their work, or
Yeah. I admire some of the older comics like George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Lenny Bruce, people who were um, not scared to say what was on their mind, even if it pissed off
Mhm,
everybody else.
mhm.
They had a good grasp on the social political atmosphere of the time. They were smart. They could speak well. They were, easy to listen to. Um, and then newer comics, I really like Shane Gillis. I really like Theo Vaughn. I really like Tom Segura. People like that. But there's a lot of yeah. All the comics that I like, they all have something I like, but not like the complete package. If that makes sense, you know.
Mhm.
But I'm also careful not to. I don't want to idolize any of them because I don't want to be any of them. If that
Right.
makes sense, like I love
Mhm,
their style or their delivery or even their impact on the industry or maybe they're just hilarious to me. But
mhm.
I don't want to be any of them. I want to be like them in the sense that I want to make the world laugh. I want to sell out shows and clubs and arenas and all of
Right.
that in the future. But I don't want to be George Carlin or Lenny Bruce or Shane Gillis because being a comedian, you have to find yourself, be on stage and be believable.
Absolutely.
And it's super obvious if you're trying to be somebody else. That's the last thing I want. So
And so, in being a comedian, because I would assume that that's hard, the depending on what your set is about, right? So I asked one of my other comedians that I had on this show not too long ago about the sensitivity of the world these days. Because a comedian like Richard Pryor or maybe like an Andrew Dice Clay, they wouldn't survive in
no,
2020.
it'd be rough for them for sure.
So how do you feel about that? Like how do you feel about now the world has gotten so sensitive that you can't even tell a joke anymore. Like how and there's a joke about certain things. So I'm just not gonna say just a joke because a joke is a
Yeah,
joke. But when certain things are a joke, then people take it to the next level, and
yeah.
it kind of makes it hard for you all because if that's something that you joke about, that's your craft, and then you gotta kind of tread lightly. Like how does that work for you?
I don't tread lightly.
You think about it, honestly.
Um, I think it's hilarious and ridiculous. Honestly, I think the world's entirely too sensitive.
Mhm,
Um, and I don't tread lightly. I don't. I will joke about anything under the sun, about anyone under the sun. I mean, I've made jokes about my wife, my kids, my
mhm.
parents, like um for me nothing's off limits. Now that being said, I don't go out with the intent of just offending people.
Right,
Um but at the same time, if you come to me and say you're offended about one of my jokes, I mean, you're only going to get a okay, because at the end of the day, if you're going to a comedy club, you should expect it, especially in a comedy club, nothing's off limits, whether it's your looks, whether it's the person you're with, whether it's the food you ordered, whether it's maybe your perfume stinks or whatever, like whatever the thing is, like
mhm,
in my mind, it's fair game.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
Now, some jokes I will run by people before I take them on stage. Like if I write a gay joke or a black joke or a woman joke, right? I'll run it by friends that I know are obviously in that demographic and be like, all right, if you didn't know me and you heard me say this, would you shoot me or would you laugh? So yeah, so it's a balancing act, but at the same time, I feel like you can't be overly conscious to the woke culture because if you do that, um, you're gonna stall out and you're gonna fall off because if especially in comedy, if you're like we see it in movies all the time, right? When they try to go super woke, they crash and burn
mhm,
because
mhm.
even the groups that they're trying to include are like, okay, this is too much. And
Right.
so that's where comedy is, I think, at the forefront of that. You have to be willing to say what's on your mind and not be afraid to say it.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but at the same time, obviously, you got to understand that there are going to be consequences for everything. But at the end of the day, if you're going to a comedy show and you're getting offended, don't go to the comedy show. You know, that's just because I mean, in my normal day to day life, granted, I'm also very front and forward and no filter. But like if I'm out in public, my goal is not to just say off the wall dumb shit for no reason. Um, but yeah, like I said, when I'm in a comedy club or if I'm in that mindset for the day, watch out. You might hear something you don't like. It's just how it goes.
So when I interview the guests here, I always, always, always bring up mental health, because I feel like that's something that's not really discussed, especially when it comes to men. And I want people to understand that men also go through things, and they also have life challenges, and they have anxiety, and I also want people to know that it's okay, for a man to say, I'm not okay, or whatever the case. So, have you ever had, any mental health challenges, when it came to maybe, like I said, your career, your marriage, your health? Like, and if so, what are some of the things that you do to channel that energy?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a huge advocate for men's mental health. One of the original podcasts I started was the Better Men podcast, which was about men's mental health, fathers' rights, things like that. And yeah, I this mindset that a man can't have feelings or express them is the reason so many men kill themselves. And it's the same reason these men are terrible to women. It's the same reason these men are terrible dads. It's the same reason these men can't hold a job because they're carrying all this burden,
Mm-hmm.
brain, whether it's self sabotaging or maybe they're in a bad relationship or whatever, and they can't release that, so they end up in the ground. And I think that's disgusting and horrible because in the world, a woman can you know throw a fit about anything, and everyone's like, well, she's a woman, she's supposed to do that. But when a
Mm-hmm.
guy's like, I don't feel supported in my life, everyone's like, well, quit being a pussy, grow up, and it's not fair. Um, and myself, I was in that boat with my first wife. She was physically and emotionally abusive. If I ever got sick or hurt, I was a bad dad and not a man for being in the hospital or being sick. Got punched, hit, whatever. And I got out of that marriage, started doing comedy, and comedy was my crutch. Or you know, because right before I started comedy, I had attempted to kill myself. I had put a gun in my mouth and got really lucky that my brother had called. I didn't answer. He got nervous. He called the cops because I'm a guy that when you contact me, I respond immediately. I mean, you saw that when you contact me, I'm instantly there. Um, so
Right.
yeah, so because of that, my brother called and they were able to obviously stop me and whatever else. Um, and then I carried that through doing comedy and while being single and not having anyone to talk to, and it became a lot. And it was actually meeting my wife now, who's my world. Was very encouraging with you clearly like because I'm a positive guy, I'm a happy guy. She was like,
Mhm.
"There's you're clearly carrying some baggage." She goes, "You need to try therapy." And of course, I was anti-therapy. I was like, "Men don't do therapy. That's pussy shit. People don't do that." And like, why would I talk to a therapist? She's just gonna judge me too. And it was the complete opposite effect. Going to therapy was monumental in me becoming a better dad, better husband, a better comedian, and just enjoying life more. It's a very important thing, and I think there should always be a brighter spotlight on mental health in general. But I think with
Mhm.
men's mental health in particular, it's such a taboo thing to talk about as a man. I think it's
Absolutely.
ridiculous. Like I'm the first that'll cry in front of somebody if I'm sad or whatever, or um, it's part of the reason I'm so open and blunt. Same thing, because through everything I was being lied to a lot and cheated on and trust issues. So through therapy, I was like, you know what? One of the things I'm going to change is I'm never going to filter. I'm never going to lie. I'm just going to
Yeah. Yeah.
be straightforward because I'd rather lose 100 friends for being honest than have 200 friends for being a liar. And that's at the end of the day, that's it. It's the same thing with like comedy and the clicks and stuff. It's you could be in the clicks and get included, but then you're in the drama, you're in the back talking, you're in the
Right.
backstabbing and the shit talking, and I don't do that. That's the reason I get along with everybody. It's because I don't click up. I'm friends with everybody. We're all cool. with me at
Mhm,
least. So
mhm.
yeah, I just men's mental health. It's can't be afraid of it. You got to tackle it.
And shout out to your wife and your brother as well, because
Oh
you
yeah,
know, and definitely God, because he wasn't ready for you yet. Um,
oh yeah.
so if you were not a comedian, what else would you do? If you had a second, if comedian absolutely was not obtainable for you, did you ever think of something else?
I wanted to be a well as an adult. I had a few different ventures I went on. I was in politics for 4 years. I ran for office. I was chairman
Okay.
of the party and all that good stuff. But I ended up not liking it because my mouth got me in trouble. Um, if I had a redo though, assuming I was still in the wheelchair, probably journalism because that's what I went to college for originally was journalism.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
for a very similar reason, I wanted to be that funny guy that was on the news, but you know, also did the news the right way, honest
mhm,
reporting, no bias, not twisting it, things like that. That's probably what I would have done because I like writing, being creative. Um, Another option may have been like acting, just because I love being in front of people and entertaining people.
mhm,
So, just basically just entertaining people one way or another. It's always been a thing. Just being on camera or in front of people and just performing and make them smile and laugh and
mhm.
forget about their shit life for 5-10 minutes.
If someone came to you and said, "Hey, got this role for you, um, playing whatever or whoever," and you had to pick your special ensemble cast, who would you love to work with and be in a production with?
Um, it would have to be a comedy for sure. So it'd have to be like Will Ferrell, or Will
I love
Forte, Mark Wahlberg, maybe Kevin Hart, um, any of them, any or like Seth Rogen, like just all of those guys, all of their humor is on par with my sense of humor. So I
Mhm,
feel like that would just be like a magical thing,
mhm.
you know, comedy movie, an all star cast of comics, and we just make the dumbest, funniest movie ever seen. Like 2.5 hours of dick jokes would be great.
So, you mentioned that you were on a morning show. So how is that going for you?
Great. Yeah. So, Coffee with the Dog. I was approached to be on it. Like I said, he has comics and authors and all that on there, and I went on. And at the time, it was a panel of three comics, well, two comics, and the main guy, Matt, who's the host, and it's his show. He's been a musician for 50 years. He's a radio personality and all that. And
Mhm,
yeah, I went on the show one time and hit it off, and then he invited me back a second time, hit it off more. Then people started asking if I was coming back, so he was like, "Hey, be on the show," and I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" And,
mhm,
it's such a fun time. It's an interview show, but it's so loosey goosey, and we have very little um, filter and censoring that we do. We're all authentically ourselves, which I love because like we have when I say we have people from all walks of life, we had a lady who was um psychic healer, like guru, author, real estate, like she did like 1,000 things, right? And like this was someone that like when I heard she was coming, I was like, man, she's gonna get offended by something. Because she was like a psychic healer, and none of us believe in that. She was, just like this thing after thing, and but we're so authentically us when we're on the air that these people, when they show up, no matter what we're joking about or talking about, they're so into it because it's just a fun, laid back experience. You don't feel like you're on Fox News. Nice.
mhm, mhm. Have you ever interviewed somebody that you just was just like, I want this to be over because why are you here?
The lady I just mentioned. The lady I just mentioned. Yeah. It was just rough because I'm one of those guys like I believe it if I see it.
Mm,
Outside of my faith, if I don't see it, I'm not buying it, And
Mhm.
psychics are one of those things where it's like I'm in the boat of yes, general questions that apply to 98% of people. Of course, they're gonna get something right. And so this lady, when she came on, it was just like, she was talking about the psychic healing and how it's guaranteed to work and all this stuff works. Like, so the host Matt asked her, he goes, "Hey, what can you tell me about this guy above me pointing at me?" And she went on this thing about these things I'd be doing in life, and not one time realizing that everything she said I was going to do, I can't do because I'm in a wheelchair. Didn't even know I was in the wheelchair. Like nothing. Like she was just zero, like batting zero. And I'm just like, all right, lady, listen. If it works for you and people pay for it, great. That's on them. But I'm over it. This is like, I'm good. But I mean, we weren't like disrespectful and we didn't like mock her and stuff. But it
Mhm.
was just one of those things where like everyone, you can just tell by everyone's face, nobody was buying it. We were all just like, oh, this was probably a mistake. But at the end of the day, she was still a great guest. She still had fun and joked around with us. But
Mhm.
yeah, that was one I was just like, the first 30 seconds, I'm like, all right, this needs to be done.
So where do you see your career heading in the next, let's say, 5 to 7 years? What do you have, if anything, on a bucket list to accomplish as far as your career goes?
Sure. So in the next 5 to 7 years, I would like to see myself touring with bigger names. Um, whether it's opening or featuring for national headlining names.
Mhm.
Um, I'd love to see myself traveling more. I'd like to go to the West Coast, the East Coast, down to Texas. Just I want to perform all over the country.
Mhm.
Um, and then like my stretch goal, I would just love to be able to travel the world and do it. Because again, the world's just a shitty, dark, depressing thing. I'd
Mhm.
love to be able to like visit the soldiers overseas and put on a show for them, or visit a refugee camp in South Korea where there's a bunch of North Koreans and make them laugh, or find people that aren't happy and make them happy.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
that's where I see myself in 5 to 7. But the stretch goal is from the nation. And I mean, granted, I also have goals like I'd like to make good money. I want to be able to pay my bills and spoil my kids and wife with
Yeah.
comedy. But I feel like doing it for the wrong reason, just for money, I don't think will do anything because I'm an intrinsic guy. I do comedy more for intrinsic reasons than anything. Because like I've mentioned, I don't want people to be as miserable as I am or as I've been.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
whatever I got to do to leave them happier than when I found them, like I'll do it. So that's yeah.
So have you how much support do you get? Because this was another thing that we talked about a lot too, previous guests. It's you get more support from people outside of your city, or maybe, the strangers support you a little bit more than your friends, or how's that going for you? Do you have the support of your city, or where you live?
Um yeah. So as far as like in my city, it's just started picking up for me locally.
Okay.
In fact, the 2 days before it happened, I was talking about it with another comic. I was like, I don't get it, man. Like, I live here, but I can't book shows here. Like, I'm
Mhm.
traveling to Indy and all over Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky. I'm going all over the place, but it's, in Indianapolis and Elkhart. But right here, where in Fort Wayne, where I'm at, it was just like nothing was happening. So that's where, being on the road a lot started. But um, now it's starting to pick up. I've booked some shows here locally, and as far as individual support from people, my family overall not supportive. I don't really talk to my parents, my brothers and sisters. They're doing their own thing. Um, but yeah, from the family, it doesn't really happen. My wife is my biggest support family wise.
Mhm.
My sister-in-law and brother-in-law, her sister and brother-in-law, they support me more than my own family does. They've come to shows and everything else, whereas my rest of my family hasn't really.
Mhm.
Um, and then as far as like friends and stuff, I all my friends support me. In fact, one of my really good friends, Dan, is the reason I tried stand up in 2018. Finally, he pushed me to do it. So as far as friends go, all my friends have had my back and are awesome, but family, yeah. And then to answer the other part, yeah, I get way more recognition outside of Indiana than I do in, for sure.
Mhm.
Like Michigan, I'm a favorite up there. I'm getting ready to go on tour at the end of July with a couple comics from Michigan. So,
Mhm.
everywhere else I'm a rising star, and then in Indiana, it's been a really slow crawl.
So I wanted to, before we closed out, I wanted to ask you because you brought up your family, and I had another guest, and we spoke, and he said the same thing. Like he doesn't have the support of his family, and I know that we do love the support of our friends and our spouses and kids and stuff like that. That's great, but it's something about when your mom gives you a hug and says great job, or your dad gives you a hug and says great job. It's just it's different, right? So by you not really having that family support, does that make you feel you know a kind of way? Like, do you sometimes picture in your head that you're going to come out on stage and maybe there's your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister? Like, have you had any of those moments?
I used to. Honestly, it was therapy that got me through it for the most part. Therapy and my wife, honestly.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, at one point, I would have loved to come out and see my parents and my brothers and sisters and grandparents, you know, out there supporting me. But I think what a lot of comics run into, especially with family, is well. Let me speak on my own family, I should say. Um, my family has a lot of preachers versus people like that. So my content that I speak and my comedy
Okay.
um, isn't as appropriate as they would like. So in return, it's very like I'm proud of you, but also you wouldn't talk like that, and I'm just like too fucking bad. Um, but um, yeah, like I have one aunt who is fairly supportive. She's like, hey, if you come down, I'll let you stay with me. If you have gigs, I'll take you to your shows, whatever. Uh, but yeah, none of them have ever come out, and for the longest time, I wanted it. But it was one of those things where I already don't talk to my family a lot,
Mhm.
and once I stopped being the one reaching out, they stopped reaching out. So it was one of those things where like it's just time to cut the negative pieces off and move on. So as
Right.
much as I'd love it, I don't have it, and at this point, it is what it is.
Goes on, right. And
Yep.
I totally agree. My dad passed away in 14.
I'm
So,
sorry to hear that.
things. There's certain things that, I wish he was still here for, and
Yeah,
stuff.
for sure. Yeah, my
Um,
my uncle who just died was one of the few family members who was always like super funny. You should try this, and he just died a few months ago.
mhm.
He never got a chance to see me perform either. So at this
Yeah.
point, the only family member I really wish would come and see me would have been him. So yeah,
Okay.
I totally get that.
All right. Well, now he has a front row seat to everything that you do now. So he knows everything. So
Oh
he
yeah.
gets to see all your shows now. Um,
Yep.
so number two, before we go, do you have anything coming up, anything in the works, that you might want to put out there besides being in Red Print Magazine? Congratulations. Um,
Thank you.
so is there anything else that you want the viewers or the listeners to know that you're doing right now?
Um, yeah, so I have a show coming up on the 21st. It's a Vegas night theme show. We're raising money for girls in Kenya. So we're doing live comedy, DJ, raffle, all that stuff. That's gonna be a load of fun. And then July 20th, I will be in Elkhart, Indiana, joining the Real Raw and Raunchy tour. We're gonna be opening for that group of touring ladies. Super funny, hilarious. These women are super funny. I can't wait to meet them. And then end of July, haven't really talked a lot about it, but we're putting the final touches on a tour at the end of
Okay.
July. So we'll be visiting a few states and bringing some laughs. So yeah.
Well, if you ever find yourself in Atlanta, please let me know, and I
Yeah.
will definitely come out to support you in anything that you have going on. If you ever find yourself here, um, again, I congratulate you and I commend you on everything that you have going on. Um,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
wish the best for everything. And you are someone who has faced more than enough adversity, like you said, mental health. You have physical health challenges, divorce, abuse. So, if there was anyone out there who wanted to do anything, not necessarily a comedian or just anything in life, and they had some adversity, what would you tell that person to do to achieve whatever it is they were trying to achieve?
The biggest thing is having the right mindset. You can't let negative people in. You can't let negative things in.
Mhm.
When things happen, you got to just understand that they happen. It's not personal. It's just life. And then you just got to keep trucking. And don't be afraid to get a therapist. Don't be afraid to, even if you're not suicidal or depressed. A therapist is somebody you can talk to, just to
Mhm.
talk to. Whether it's just shooting the shit or whatever. Having that impartial person, overall is a really good thing to have. So
Mhm.
that'd be my recommendation: is just cut the shit out that doesn't do you any good. And um, as selfish as it sounds, think about yourself. Worry about yourself. You can't take care of yourself. You can't take care of anyone else.
Absolutely. And big shout out to your wife again. Like I said, she seems to be very supportive. You're very happy,
Oh yeah.
and we are glad that you're out of that other situation and you're prospering. Um, and if anybody wanted to follow you on any types of social medias and they wanted to know what was going on, how would they be able to do so?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website. It's the sitcom.info. It's got all my social media. It's got video clips. It's got a live feed of my Instagram. Or if you just want to hit the social media at the Stephen Ortiz, it's two E's and the underscore Stephen underscore Ortiz. It's easier if you just find my website. I promise you.
And is that also where they could go and see your show as well, your morning show?
Um, so go to my website, follow me on the socials, and then I share the show stuff on like my Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, because
Okay.
we go live on we're live on every platform. So Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, Twitch, Kick. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're nationally syndicated on 2 radio shows or channels. We're part of a couple comedy radio networks. So
Oh,
we're
nice.
all over the place. So yeah, just come to my website, follow my socials, and then you'll find the links to the show.
Okay, great. And thank you again for agreeing to have this conversation. I really did enjoy it. It was very entertaining. And again, like I said, congratulations on everything that you have going on and everything that you will have going on moving forward. And if you ever are around, just hit me up. Come on out. Because, And any last words before we wrap up? Anything you want to say? Any shout outs you want to give or anything like that?
Um, I just want to say thank you for having me on, and good luck on all your endeavors, both current and future. And all I can say to everyone is laugh. It's not that bad.
And then on that note, I'm going to say good night, and I will see you all next week. I am Tyna Show, and this is the sitcom, Mr. Stephen Ortiz. And this is the What a Man podcast signing off. I'll see y'all next week. Bye. Hey y'all, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Want to know more about Stephen Ortiz? You can check him out in Red Print Magazine. You can listen to his morning show, Coffee with the Dog, or you can check out his website at www.thesitcom.info. Thanks for watching. Bye.